Hey, what's up, viewer? Welcome back to this nebulous creation series. This is hour 5 of day 3, and that's going to make this my record so far in 3 days for most hours in one day. Not sure if I'll ever get to 24 hours, but we'll see what happens. At the moment, I'm having trouble getting the collider to detect collisions from any active scanning objects. Something that I had thought about in the meantime that I kind of realized was that these objects don't have rigid bodies. Therefore, they don't always calculate properly in the rigid or in the physics system, even though they have a collider on them and a mesh on them. Therefore, the plan is to check real quick what happens if I add a rigid body to the planet, and it's not going to use any gravity, and it's not actually going to move around. So I'm just going to constrain all of its positions, which I know is... The other thing I might be able to do is raise the mass up. And that makes it like impossible to move, but for now, let's just set it to 0. Oh, it's gotta be at least 1. For now, I'm just gonna freeze everything, and then... Let's see, if it is kinematic, that means it doesn't move under certain conditions, but it does move under other conditions. Like, it moves other physics things, but other physics things don't move it or something, but in this instance, it just sits there constrained. And the idea is perhaps now I can perhaps now the ring will actually hit the thing. And so in this instance it's a trigger. Okay, so let's give this a shot again. And actually I have to double check, did I take the code out of there? So this was supposed to go on the planets. Active scan form still has this. Do the planets have this though? Yes, they do. So they're being double tested, so I'm going to turn it off real quick. Because we actually aren't sure if the planet, or I would rather just have the objects detect the collision than have each planet hooked in for the collisions. Slight difference, but that's what I'm imagining. Alright, let's see if this will register any collisions. Trying to remember where this was. I think it was off to this direction. Alright, so let's see if this will hit anything. And that time it did trigger something. And what I'm imagining is the trigger must have hit we'll just say other that name. And we'll see what is triggering here. Once it decides to stop fussing. Give it a second to compile. In this particular instance, sometimes it hangs. And we will now see, the thing is it might be colliding with its own planet's collider. However, it has started colliding. Therefore, the idea is that it should be working basically as I anticipated it to be working. And I did have one in the upper quadrant. So if I run scan, trigger planet clone, It is the name of it. It's only triggering once though. Triggering once though. So I'm gonna activate this and see if it triggers. Oh, it says it's out of range actually. Look at that. That's why it's not working. Because the planet is, in fact, not close enough. So how about now if I run a scan like this, let's see if it will trigger twice. It didn't send out the scan, so let's redo this here. It's still only triggering once though. So even if they're turned on, see what if I turn this on to continuous. It still says 2. What about this one? Nope. Let's leave it on discrete. It is detecting one of them, which is why I'm trying to I don't have one sitting still at the moment. So the only, well, so what I'm kind of confused about is why is one planet's collider working and why isn't the other one's working? Or why is one planet's working and not the other planet's? So the only thing that really comes to mind is that the player scan try turning off that it's a trigger. And this needed to be 6. And then we would run the scan, and it didn't work there for some reason. And there's that time it didn't trigger anything. So it only triggered something when it was a trigger collider. However, I guess what's happening is that it's got to be the object or something, but and there's also these cooking options. Alright, so if I can't get this to work soon, my idea is just going to be to use the sphere collider instead. Because I'm actually not sure why I understand that the planet has a collider. It's got to be the object moving through something. Like it's got to be basically max this and then scan this, pause, grab this and take a look here. It's doing the cooking everything option. But what it's not doing is saying -8, 6, for instance. And it has now entered it, so let me see if it triggers another one in the exit plane mode here. It has not. You know, I'm not sure what's going on here. The only other thing I can think of was putting a rigid body on the active player scan. Same deal though, it wouldn't use gravity. I can't remember what is kinematic means exactly. I know it changes what can... So I don't want this to be literal physics, that's the thing. But maybe this will do something for collision detection. Still nothing, geez. Yeah, that's very strange. So in this instance, I'm really not sure. Let me see though if I turn this on, if I can do it. So even with it turned on, see what happens if I turn off its trigger. That time it just says collision. The only issue is that it says it only says it out after coming out of the center of this for some reason. Alright, so the only other idea I had would be to whenever I set the verts here, I basically have to reassign the mesh collider. Not sure if this will do it or not. I think that one just fired twice, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe not. Darn it. For a split second there, it was like it was working. I must have just not cleared it. So it's still saying it's a collision. I'm just saying this is kinematic. So that time it said 2 again, but I guess I didn't clear it. It's only hitting once. So then what if I make it a trigger? Oh, the sphere's collider is in the wrong spot. Or no, it's not. Okay, so yeah, that's the sphere's collider. Alright, so it still says the mesh is here. Darn, this doesn't work, darn. I was thinking maybe. That time it looked like it went twice. I'm really not sure of the planet. See what if I turn on the planet? That time it hit a bunch of planets. Okay, so let me turn it back off. And now it's just magically not working. So let's try turning it on, but turning its renderer off. And then launching a scan here. So that's how it weirdly said like a bazillion times. So that's a little strange because it's only supposed to trigger on enter. It's almost like each part of the collider triggers it or something. So that's unfortunately not exactly what I was imagining. However, I suppose the only thing we can really do is set it up to where other.game object .get component mesh renderer dot set enabled or active or enabled equals true. And that'll just let me see real quick. Is there like another? I guess not. It's putting me in a weird spot here. This is almost going to require me to activate all of the objects but turn off the renderers at spawn. That's what I'm imagining here, so here what I actually want to do is say get component mesh renderer dot enabled equals false. We'll leave the other stuff on. And we'll see if this will essentially activate the objects, enable them, quote unquote. And it just didn't work. Oh, part of that does because this was supposed to go to 6. So let's see if this time it will catch it. Okay, so that worked, more or less. And if I run it again, it doesn't do anything really. So then if I zoom out and I arc it up just all the way here and run a scan, it will discover some other stuff. And that is kind of accurate for how it's supposed to work. There are going to be some minor instances where it's not going to show the whole planet or anything, but it will show the scanning signature, like UI element that I have to create or whatever, and that will basically work like that also. Once it scans it, it will throw up the UI element as opposed to the actual object renderer. And then the player will have the ability to scan at a higher frequency to attempt to spawn the object, essentially. Because if it's too small, you have to have more precise coordinates to warp your ship there. Is essentially the idea. So you have to send out scans at a higher frequency to discover those more exact coordinates, and your ships can fly there, is essentially the idea. That includes combat ships and scanning ships and resource harvesting ships, which is how you'll actually get stuff out of the asteroid belts or the gas clouds or any like scavenging sites or something. You'll have to send like the trading ships, the hauling ships there to grab the stuff. Or you might even need special mining ships. I haven't decided yet how complicated I can get it to go. And then the planets would need a ship that can quote-unquote claim them. So there might be like, even though we've scanned it like this, the planets might be able to reveal more information about them if we do more specific scans on the planets. So kind of what it wants to do is, there's a part of this that needs to essentially target a scannable. So the idea would be to hold like a control click. If I hold control and I click this, for instance, it wouldn't actually select it. It would quote-unquote target it. So this scanner, being at 360, would more or less change its angle to be like exactly correctly scanning on this planet at the correct range also. So the idea is that we are essentially getting the most cost-effective scan radius on the planet as I can, and the computer will do a better job of handling the math. But the idea would be to click like Control, left click, and the scanner would zip to this like this. And that would allow me to come down here and you could set up a scan that's like a much higher frequency, fire the scan, and you're basically like scanning the planet, is the idea. And with a higher frequency, it reveals more information about the planet before you conquer it. Like, which implores the planet to almost have like multiple tiers of potential resources or something like that, or multiple tiers of discovery on the planet, which is kind of interesting. Complicates the planet conquering system if it's not just flat values, but something the player... It's something that might be a little bit more on the artistic side of things than the prototypical side of things, for sure. So I might just... I still think this being able to target the scan is important. And for local ship fights, like, you would essentially be doing the same thing. It would be, you would just constantly be basically locking targets like that, super close range with super high frequency, and that lets you more or less quote-unquote perma-lock them. It's almost as if you're just permanently scanning, which would be pretty sweet. So then the other thing would be fixing this to go to 360 would be nice also. So let's see if I can figure that out really fast here. It would wind up being under active scanning elements. If the min-max slider ever changes, So for some reason it's managing to lock itself. So the real idea would be if greater than 360. Somewhere I have to check if it's greater than 360. It's up here in initialization notes. This is initialization. Okay, so if the value changes, less than or equal to 360, perhaps. Oh, I see what I was doing. So if it's less than 360, set it to 360. The problem is it's like getting stuck at 355 and then not scanning up to 360. So more or less what I really have to do is say else if value.newValue.y is or minus value.newValue.x is greater than 360. Greater than or equal to 360. Which is every other condition. But then it should have been working in the first place. So maybe instead it's like this. So it can't be anything else, so I'm just gonna try this here. Small little bug, but it will help things to sort that issue out. And I also need to eventually rebalance the frequency value to reduce how quick the scan goes. Because the scan isn't supposed to be... It's still doing this 355 thing. So it can't just be the new value. So maybe I should say new value here, and then it will... Or it can't be greater than 360, because... I guess essentially what I'm envisioning is I've got to say if value.previous value dot x is not equal to value dot new value dot x, so if x has changed, then x needs to get... Shoot, I don't know if this is correct or not, because the previous value is way less than 355. Okay, so essentially, if the first number changes, so the total equals 360, but the minimum value needs to be okay, so if x changes, then the new minimum value needs to be previous value dot y minus 360f. And this will hard clamp it to a 360 range. And it won't change this, so it'll be a 360. Else, and we want to say x else, okay, so any other condition but a new x value would mean that it would have to be a new y value. So I guess more specifically, these we don't want changing at the same time. In this particular instance, they wouldn't necessarily be changing at the same time, they'd keep their range anyway. This is in an instance where the range is expanded by one of the two ulterior values, so we will just keep it easy here and do the same type of code. And then we will set the maximum value to the same concept, previous value.x plus 360. And that will basically make sure everything stays proper. And that's separate from both changing at the same time, I think. Yes, because this can only happen if one of the sliders raises the range over this. So the other instances would be adjusting the angle or the angle's rotating, which is accurate. So let's see if this is fixed or not. I can also add like 36 points to the circle, and then that might make it look a little smoother with 3 angles. So let's see. So can I finally jack this up to 360? Okay, good. Yes, I can. So now I have a 360-degree circle properly mapped out. And let me make sure that it's clean on the other side too. So if I come up here, it's 360. And if I reset it and I want to expand it from this side, does it also work? Yes, it does. Okay, so that's a little bug, but that's fixed now. Uh-oh, and I missed one. It missed the one that had a mesh render. Oh, it's out of range. Okay. Okay, so that's pretty cool. The planets are almost scanning. And they effectively are scanning. It just might not be as efficient with how that mesh collider was running multiple instances. But the little part's fixed. So now we're wondering about maybe target locking, which begs for a lot of extra stuff on the planets. And so target locking, tentative. There's also the tech window for increasing the range, which is tentative. The lock system would make me have to do some work with the frequency balancing, which would be a few things. And there's also signatures that don't have objects yet because they are not scanned down all the way. The other thing I could do is make every object a physical object, but only make ones that are scanned down all the way warpable. Makes some sense. And then I would have to differentiate the celestials. And that might be easier than the whole rendering thing. I could just put the percentage like in the description thing, but it feels more visually clear if there is a UI output, essentially. A percentage readout would be nice, so it's a scan signature. If I do that, the player will... It's one of those things where they will understand what's going on. Otherwise, we're looking at just having an object with a, maybe with a transparency to denote that it's not completely scannable, or not completely scanned. There would need to be some kind of readout that talks about how tough of a signature it is. More or less. So that's almost asking for a info box for a selection. Either an info box for a selection or like just a percentage on the object, which is the same principle. A screen space positioned text output, basically. There could be some lore, though. In a selection panel output, there could be, important information for the player. So it feels a little necessary to have one irregardless. So I'm going to see what I can do here. This is active scanning elements, main UI. So in here I need to add a new element called this is we can call this active selection panel. or active selection data panel. And I go one step further and call it active selection readout, which is fighting with this for position. I definitely want the main UI beneath it. However, it has its own parameters here. So we're looking at the width being, whoops, height. We want the height to basically just be the whole size of the percentage maybe will work. So it's almost going to 100%. I guess 90% works. It would be cool if it would just fill height-wise. Width percentage. So we might have something like this. Give it a white background. And actually we would want it to have a smidgen of a margin on the bottom. Or perhaps padding on the bottom. So I guess that didn't work. It'd have to be margin then, right? And essentially there's got to be another visual element inside of here and a button. And essentially the idea is that this is organized by flexing left to right. The button wouldn't say button, it would wouldn't really say anything. And then this visual element would grow all the way, which would force the button over here. Which makes me essentially want to make this transparent. And then this element can have a white background. And this element can have a I was going to say have a slight margin on the right, but it might not need it. So let's see here, the button. So I'll toggle active selection readout. Whoops, I called it read it. And then let's save this and take a look at how it looks. in the game. I kind of think it kind of feels too far to the right, or too far to the left. I almost want it to be like right here or something. Alright, so the idea is I can just open and close this by clicking this button. It might also be better on this side because I guess it depends if you read left to right or right to left. I really feel as if it's going to be better probably left to right for now. Although this is messed up, I need to increase the minimum value. Yeah, it's so weird how that it doesn't match. Let me double check that I am using the main camera. Obviously, if I click match game view. Yeah, it's already at the right resolution, looks like. Alright, well, it still looks proper here. So I kind of feel like it pops, I almost feel like it pops up from like right here. And it goes for info. That, or maybe it comes from the other side, would still be better. Having it toggle in and out would be pretty sweet though. So probably have like a more, the idea would maybe have like a more detailed image of the planet or something. And then have like economy values listed. And then maybe have some scan signature stuff. And then maybe have some text description of like maybe some like minor lorical things. But it depends on what will go in there. So we might even be able to do like resolution photo, some kind of lore, and then maybe scan potential. And then have the economy values of the selection be done here, which gives you the ability to invest in them using some later mechanics I'm going to add. Alright, so this will require toggling this. It will require opening, or like opening and or switching the info box, or basically, so opening the info box and then clicking on something would, or I can even make it to where if I hold Alt or something, like shift click or alt click would open it up with it. I'll have to consider that as a hotkey, but the basic idea would be to output some data here about the planet, which would allow me to set up like an asteroid signature and in like a gas cloud signature that can be scanned but need more work, or they need more frequency to be scanned to a point where they are like a ship can actually warp to them properly. And I can put that value in this info box. And the player can check on selection the estimated frequency size or something like that, or the tier, the scanning tier, and then the player can see that, oh, this signature is like a tier 2, so that's easy. I'll lock on and put it at 2. But if it's like a tier 9, they might not be able to, and they might not want to invest in it just yet. Because the idea is to make the, right now it's linear for the frequency, but my idea is to like probably use some kind of curve. So maybe a cube to where, or a square to where it's like squared more expensive from 1 to 10 as opposed to just linear. And that'll feel a little, that'll make a little bit more sense, because the idea is that the smaller stuff has like more value, more like upfront value, and bigger stuff, the idea I suppose tends to have it be like over time more value. So like big planets, you have to, there's upfront cost to claim them and then you have to invest in them, but they give you over time. They keep increasing your economy tick. And as the SIGs get harder and harder to scan, the idea is that whatever you find there isn't like as much of an overtime value as it is an upfront value. And that can help with some of the logical aspects of the game for you to actually be trying to discover things in the game, as opposed to just claim resources. But that's a little bit more on the logical side, it's a little bit more on the non-prototypical side, so. Alright, so it looks like the video is closing in on an hour. So the scanning is getting there. Making this window open and close will allow me to have some extra information, and I might make it to where I can go on this side, so I can read it left to right. And then it'll have to update some data whenever I select stuff. I can add hotkeys to have it be closed and then open only if I hold a certain hotkey, so there's ways to make it a little bit more convenient here and there. And then it'll have to, like, in the long term, it would be cool to have an image, but initially it'll just have a name and then some other minor information. It could have a text box for more info, but not just quite yet, and then some scanning information until I decide to make a UI element that pops up in the game, and we'll have to see if that's better. That might wind up being better than running it through here. So I'll have to decide in the long run. But alright, so yeah, that was 1 hour of live development. I am still grinding forward on this scanning system. I've got to make a couple more strategic decisions as to how it all works together, but it is almost complete as a mechanic for this game, so I appreciate that you've watched it this far. Take care.